لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. All praise is due to Allah, and after that all praise is due to Allah. We thank Him, we seek help from Him, we ask guidance in Him, and we seek forgiveness in Him from our own evils and from our own bad deeds. Anyone who has been guided by Allah, they are indeed guided, and anyone who has been misguided by Allah, you will never find a guardian to guide them. I bear witness. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except for Allah, the only one, without partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a servant and his messenger. To proceed forward. It's been a while since I've been up here, so I want to start off, inshallah, with a story, if you don't mind. This is about 20 years ago, and this is in the Junior Olympics. And there was a race that was being held, mostly obviously juniors, so there were only about 8 or 9 contestants, and they were running a race. And so they were all eager to be able to not only win the race, but their parents were in the crowd, and they really wanted to show their parents exactly how well they had trained, but also how well they could actually do. And so as the race started, all of them were very, very eager to get started and to be able to win the race, but halfway through, there was one of the Olympians who actually fell to the ground. And when she fell to the ground, she started to cry because there was a lot of pain that she was suffering. And when she did that, then one of the other runners, one of the other Olympians, he stopped as well. And he came up to her and he said, "Hey, this is in the middle of a race, by the way, right? Hey, are you okay? Is everything going to be okay with you?" And she wouldn't stop crying. And so he started to console her, to sit with her. And then when he looked up, he realized that all of the other runners that were there, who also had stopped the race, had walked back and were trying to console this one person about everything would be okay, you're going to be fine, and it doesn't matter whether you fell. And all of a sudden, in front of all the crowd that was there, and all the parents that were there, and all the relatives, and all the people that were there, she finally got up. All of the Olympians, the Paralympians, they locked arms with each other, and they walked to the finish line all at once. Now the question we have to ask ourselves, or we have to ask you, and I also ask myself, is who won that race that day? Who won? Who won that race? The Summer Olympics have come to a close, and many people are excited about the medals that they've won, and some are sad about the ones that they actually lost. The countries are counting their victories, and tallies are taking place all over the internet, the social media, and internet conversations about who actually had the most amount of medals that were there. And not to be outdone by the overall medal count, there's some people who are saying, well, yes, the overall medal count was, if you look at the order, this is the way it was. But if you look at the order per number of population in the country, then there's a whole other ranking altogether. So they're kind of spinning different ways about who actually won the most amount of medals. And that's just to be able to not be outdone. And in the actual games themselves, whether it be in the swimming, the diving, the running, whatever the different games that there were, in the actual games, there were true stories of victories. Like Michael Phelps, who won in his lifetime 24 medals, nobody had done that for like 2,000 years or so. So there were true victories that were done. There were stories of sportsmanship, right? True sportsmanship that actually came out. And sometimes, unfortunately, there were stories of heartbreak. Literally sometimes, because some of the gymnasts actually fell and broke their leg. And I'm sure you've seen those videos on YouTube. And then there was also, there was plain unsportsmanlike conduct as well. Like for example, sometimes when there was a loser, as they got up, it was customary to shake the winner's hand, they refused to do it. So there was unsportsmanlike conduct also happening at the same time. But with all of this counting and tallying that's taking place, you know, the talk of who's better and who's the best, who's faster, who's stronger, we have lessons to be able to learn from these games that could possibly apply to our lives as well. So the first lesson that I'd like to kind of think about is hard work and determination pay off. Hard work and determination pay off. But then you ask yourself, do they? Not, you know, all the athletes that were there were spending their entire life training. But there was only one gold medal winner, and there was one silver, one gold. Everybody else didn't get anything. So does hard work really pay off? And is that the only thing that we have to worry about? The second one is that you will always be the best forever. Are you? There's always somebody. The records have always been broken in the past, and they probably will be in the future. There's always somebody that's going to be stronger, faster, more intellectual, smarter, prettier, more handsome. There's somebody always there behind you that's always going to do a better job than you did. You cannot last forever. There's only one thing that's eternal in this world, and that is the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. Nothing else is going to last. So in my opinion, the biggest lesson that I can learn, and I was reminded of in the games, in the Olympic Games, was that it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. You know, in sports, you can always cheat to win, right? You can take body enhancing drugs to be able to get better than somebody else, to become stronger. You can be unsportsmanlike and cheat and do other things to be able to push the other person down. But is that really the point? And at the end of the day, when you're done with the Olympics and you go back to your regular life, right? Is that really going to matter that you won the gold? Because deep down inside, you're going to know you did it without earning it. So really, that can't be what the reason is. And the same can be true said about life as well. The same is true within our lives. As Muslims, we know, and we must know, that the ultimate reality is the hereafter. And our test is that on the Day of Judgment. That's when the gold medals are going to be won, the ones who enter paradise. And that's when the losers are going to be determined. That's when everybody, whoever ends up in the hellfire. That's our Olympics, if you want to call it. But on that Day of Judgment, when we're standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the question we have to ask is, will He separate us based on our accomplishments within our life? For example, if you went to Harvard rather than going to, I don't know, Yale or other universities, Oxford, is He going to say, well, everybody who went to an Ivy League college step in this corner, and everybody who didn't step in that corner? Or is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to judge you based on your money? So He's going to say, anybody who's a billionaire stay here, millionaires here, and everything like that. Or is it going to be on your status? All the countries go here, all the datos are here, and everybody else, well, you're over here. Is that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to do? No. That's not what He's going to do at all. And so think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not even judge us solely whether we finished our deed or not. That's not what counts in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What rather, what was the beginning of the deed, which is what? Your intention, your niyyah. What was the beginning of your deed, that's what counts. And what was in the middle of while you were actually doing that deed. Were we obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did we commit any sins while we were doing it? Were we arrogant or were we prideful in conducting that good deed that we were doing? That is what counts. So if you're giving charity, for example, it starts off with the right intention. If you have the right intention, then you started off in the right way. And then when you're actually giving that money or whatever charity you're doing, then it comes down to how are you looking at the person that you're giving it to? And what are you thinking about how other people will perceive you whenever you're doing that? These are the things that count more than the actual end beneficiary of that deed itself. And this is something that is very, very important. So it's fair to say, as a Muslim, the ends do not justify the means. Right? Let me repeat that. The ends do not justify the means. Meaning, we can't do whatever we want as long as we finish on top. We cannot do whatever we want as long as we're the best and everybody is not. We have to look at very, very we have to scrutinize the means towards that end that we are trying to achieve, which inshallah for all of us is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we need to focus on these means and be able to really do them in the right way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, He says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. Right? He says, indeed those who have said, our Lord is Allah, رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ, our Lord is Allah, and then remained on the right course. They were upright. Istaqamu. So it's not only about our Lord is Allah, but then they remained steadfast. They were upright in their character and whatever else they did. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on, He says, the angels will descend upon them saying, do not fear, do not grieve, but receive good tidings of paradise, which you were promised. Right? So it's what not only saying that Rabbuna Allah is our creator, but then also what you do afterwards. It's not only about doing the deed, what are you doing while you're going through this? And in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, do you know, he asked the question to the companion, he said, do you know who is a pauper? Who is a pauper? A poor person. And the companion replied and said, yes, a pauper is a person who has no money or property. And the Prophet ﷺ, he clarified that. And he said the pauper is among my followers, is the one who will come on the day of judgment with a good record of salah, with a good record of siyam, so prayer, fasting, with a good record of zakat, which is the obligatory tax, charity, but also he will abuse somebody. He slandered against someone, stole the wealth of another person, had killed someone or beaten yet another person. Then all of the oppressed persons will receive from the aggressor's good deeds. And if those good deeds fall short, then they're going to take their bad deeds and give them to the aggressor as well. And he will be transferred from them to him, and he will be thrown into the fire. Right? So how we actually go about doing the deeds that we're doing. This person, he prayed, he fasted, he gave his zakat, he did everything, and yet he was doing other things as well. And so those other things began to trump whatever the good that he was doing. And that is something we always have to keep in mind. What is it? That it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And then also we have to ask ourselves, and we must ask, will we go to paradise, will we go enter into heaven or Jannah purely on our deeds alone? Purely on our deeds. And the answer is obviously, if you don't know, the answer is no, we're not. It is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will allow us to enter paradise by His deeds alone. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, no one will enter paradise by his deeds alone. And the companions asked him, he said, not even you, Ya Rasulullah? And he said, not even me, unless Allah covers me with the grace and mercy. SubhanAllah. Right? Now you think about it and say, well, anything that I've done so far, there's no guarantee that's going to get me into paradise. It's only from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the end, right? The end for us is by the mercy of Allah. So what do we have to focus on? Not the end, because that's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The end is up to Allah. What we do when we make the initial intention to do something good, and what we do while we're doing that good, that is more important. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look at, and inshallah with the mercy that He grants us, we will be able to join the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in paradise. It is not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. In this Summer Olympics that we just had, there was one race that actually happened. It was in Rio. It was a 5,000 meter race. And they were all running hard. It was the middle of the race. The race has already started. Everybody was running really, really hard. Maybe you know the story. They were all running really, really hard. And it was 4 laps to go before the end. And suddenly, the New Zealander who was running, her name was Hamlin, she stumbled and she fell straight on her face. And because it was a very, very tight group of people that were running, and they were almost towards the end, so they were very close to each other, the person right behind her was an American, a US runner, by the name of Augustino. And so when she fell, Augustino fell also. Okay? Now imagine what's going on. There's a race going on, somebody falls in front of you, you end up falling because of her. It wasn't because of something you did. Now, when both of them fell, the Augustino, who was not the cause, she got up and she held up the hand of Hamlin, she picked her up and said, let's go finish the race. And they started running again. And as soon as they started running, the US athlete, D'Agostino, she fell again because she had a hurt leg, she couldn't do it anymore. And so when Hamlin passed her again, she stopped. She turned around, walked back over to D'Agostino, and she said, get up, we have to finish this race. And so both of them, in arm, they actually obviously finished last, but they both crossed the finish line together, and they finished the race. And what's particularly important here that I want to mention is the remarks that Hamlin made about the actual race itself. She said, you know, when I look back in Rio 2016, I'm not going to remember where I finished, whether I was first or middle or last. I'm not going to remember that. I'm not going to remember my time. What was my time? How fast was I running when I actually ran? But what I will always remember is that moment when somebody picked me up. It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. Who won that 5,000 meter race that day? Does anybody know who the gold winner was for the 5,000 meter women's race? Probably not. But the majority of the people will remember this story because of the true sportsmanship that was actually shown. Again, it's not a matter of whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله ولكم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. You know, brothers, in life, we get so caught sometimes in winning. We get so caught up in our accomplishments, so caught up in the end result, that we forget that the end is always up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Whether it be with our grades, with our degrees, with our titles, with our money, all those things, that end, whatever that accomplishment you want to do, that is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we have control over is the beginning, which is our niyyah, our intention, and how we go about doing the deed that we're doing. So when you're studying for your exams, what is your niyyah? Check yourself, right? And then as you're studying, are you going to study with basically unsportsmanlike? That means if anybody asks you a question, you're like, no, I don't want to help you, I'm only focusing on myself. Or are you going to help somebody else along and say, let's study together so that I can help you and you can help me? When you're in your careers, the same thing, the same situation applies. Are you so focused on your salary? Are you so focused on your rank in your company or in your industry that you forget about everything else? Or did you have the right intention when you began? That I want to work only to be able to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then as you're going along, not only are you doing the best that you can do, which is also from our sunnah, but also being able to help people along as you're moving up within the ranks. And inshallah, again, those ranks that you move up are only because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the Day of Judgment, your degree is not going to count, but how you got it will count. Your wealth will not matter, but how you earned it will matter. And also, your status won't matter either, but what you did with that status when you had it, that is what's going to count. There was a hadith of a man, we probably all know the story, that he did bad deeds his entire life. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded, he did the opposite. Everything good, he did bad. And so on the Day of Judgment, he knew he was a goner. There's no way that he was going to go to paradise. And so he thought to himself and he said, you know, my entire life, I've done everything bad. Let me do one thing that'll be good. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the angels to tell him to go to the hellfire, he ran to the hellfire. He ran. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stopped him. He said, you've done nothing good your entire life. Your entire life, everything I asked you to do good, you did the opposite, you did something bad. So why is it that you're now running to the hellfire? And so he said, Ya Allah, I just wanted to have one deed that I did before I went to the hellfire that was in something that I obeyed you with. And not only obeyed you with, but I did it with earnesty and with quickness. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just because of that, entered that person into paradise. Right? The end, brothers, does not matter. It's the middle, the beginning and the middle that is more important. Now, I'm going to do something unconventional, because you know I do things unconventional in the khutbahs. So I'm going to read you a poem that I feel that really touched me a lot, and I hope, inshallah, you'll be able to benefit from it as well. The poem is called The Race. The Race, and it's by an author called D. Groberg. You can look it up if you want to. D. Groberg, The Race. Quit, give up, you're beaten, they shout at me and plead. There's just too much against you now. This time you can't succeed. And as I start to hang my head in front of failure's face, my downward fall is broken by the memory of a race. And hope refills my weakened will, and as I recall that scene, for just the thought of that short race rejuvenates my being. A children's race, young boys, young men, how I remember well. Excitement, sure, but also fear. It wasn't hard to tell. They all lined up so full of hope, each thought to win the race, or tie for first, or if not that, at least take second place. And fathers watched from off the side, each cheering for his son. And each boy hoped to show his dad that he would be the one. The whistle blew and off they went, young hearts and hopes fire. To win and be the hero there was each young boy's desire. And one boy in particular, whose dad was in the crowd, was running near the lead and thought, my dad would be so proud. But as he speeded down the field across a shallow dip, the little boy who thought to win lost his step and slipped. Trying hard to catch himself, quit, give up, you're breathing. They shouted me and plead. There's just too much against you now. This time you can't succeed. So down he fell, and with him hope. He couldn't win now. Embarrassed, sad, he only wished to disappear somehow. But as he fell, his dad stood up and showed his anxious face, which to the boy so clearly said, get up and win the race. He quickly rose, no damage done, behind a bit, that's all, and ran with all his mind and might to make up for his fall. So anxious to restore himself, to catch up and to win, his mind went faster than his legs. He slipped and fell again. He wished then he had quit before, with only one disgrace. I'm hopeless as a runner now. I shouldn't try to race. But in the laughing crowd he searched, in the laughing crowd he searched and found his father's face. That steady look which said again, get up and win the race. So he jumped up to try again, 10 yards behind, that's all. If I'm gonna gain these yards, he thought, I've got to real move fast. Exerting everything he had, he gained 8 or 10. But trying so hard to catch the lead, he slipped and fell again. Defeat, he lied there silently. A tear dropped from his eye. There's no sense in running anymore. 3 strikes, I'm out. Why try? The will to rise had disappeared, and all hope had fled away. So far behind, so error-prone, a loser all the way. I've lost, so what's the use? He thought. I'll give up. I'll live with my disgrace. But when he thought about his dad, who soon he'd have to face, get up, an echo sounded low. Get up and take your place. You were not meant for failure here. Get up and win the race. With borrowed will, get up, it said. You haven't lost at all. For winning is no more than this, to rise each time you fall. So up he rose to run once more, and with him new commit. He resolved that win or lose, at least he wouldn't quit. So far behind the others now, the most he'd ever been, still he gave it all he had, and ran as though to win. 3 times he'd fallen, stumbling, 3 times he rose again. Too far behind to hope to win, he still ran to the end. They cheered the winning runner as he crossed the finish line first place, head high and proud and happy, no falling, no disgrace. But when the fallen youngster crossed the line last place, the crowd gave him a greater cheer for finishing the race. And even though he came in last with head bowed low and proud, you would have thought he'd won the race to listen to the crowd. And to his dad, he sadly said, "I didn't do too well." "To me, you've won," the father said. "You rose each time you fell." And when things seem dark and hard and difficult to lose, the memory of that little boy helps me in my race. For all of life is like that race, and with ups and downs and all you have to do to win is rise each time you fall. "Quit, give up, you're beaten," they still shout in my face. But another voice within me says, "Get up and win the race." Get up and win the race. We all go through hardships within our lives, brothers. Inshallah, the point of the race is basically just to prove to us that whatever happens, the end is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our job is to get up and be able to do the best that we can. And inshallah, with the mercy of Allah, knowing that we did the best that we were possibly able to do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us paradise. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridaka wal jannah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكيهم أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها مولاها. اللهم إنا نسألك إيمانا كاملا ويقينا صادقا وقلبا خاشعا ولسانا ذاكرا شاكرا وعملا صالحا وعلما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وتوبة نصوحا وتوبة قبل الموت وراحة عند الموت ومغفرة بعد الموت برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل